cappuccino specifically to shine its warmth upon me. The problem with feeling guilty about pulling sickies, as I now discover, is that you end up too terrified to leave the house and therefore waste the entire day. And of course, the less you do, the less you want to do, so by 2 o'clock I'm bored, listless and sleepy. Rather than taking the easy option and going back to bed, I decide to wake myself up with strong coffee, have a shower and finally get dressed. The cappuccino machine, an early wedding present from my chief executive, shouts a shiny hello from its corner on the kitchen worktop, by far the most glamorous and high-tech object in the kitchen, if not the entire flat. Were it not for Dan, I'd never use the bloody thing, and that's despite a passion for strong, milky cappuccinos. Technology and I have never got on particularly well. The only technological area in which I excel is computers, but even then, now that all my junior colleagues are messing around with iPods and MPEGs and God knows what else, I'm beginning to be left behind there too. My basic problem is not so much technology as paper. Instruction manuals, to be specific. I just haven't got the patience to read through them, and almost everything in my flat works eventually if I push a few buttons and hope for the best. Admittedly, my video recorder has never actually recorded anything, but I only ever bought the machine to play rented videos on, not to record, so as far as I'm concerned, it has fulfilled its purpose admirably. Actually, come to think of it, not quite everything has worked that perfectly. The freezer has spent the last year filled with ice and icicles, although I think that somewhere behind the ice may be a year-old carton of Ben & Jerry's, and my Hoover still has the same dust bag it's had since I bought it 3 years ago, because I haven't quite figured out how to change it. I cut a hole in it when it was full one time and hand-pulled all the dust out, then sealed it back up with tape, and that seems to do the job wonderfully. If anything, just think how much money I've saved myself on Hoover bags. Ah yes, there is also the super swish and super expensive CD player that can take 400 discs at a time, that has in fact only ever held one at a time. So things may not work the way they're supposed to, or in the way the manufacturers intended, but they work for me. And now I have Dan. Dan, who will not lay a finger on any new purchase until he has read the instruction manual cover to cover, until he has ingested even the smallest of the small print, until he can recite the manual from memory alone. And so Dan, bless him, now reads the manuals and gives me demonstrations on how things like Hoovers, tumble dryers and cappuccino machines work. The only saving grace to this, other than now being able to work the cappuccino machine, is that Dan has learned to fine-tune his demonstrations so they last no longer than 1 minute, by which time I'll have completely tuned out and will be thinking either about new presentations at work or possibly dreaming about floating on a desert island during our honeymoon. But the cappuccino machine, I have to say, is brilliant, and God, am I happy I actually paid attention when Dan was showing me how it worked. It arrived 3 days ago, and thus far I've used it 9 times. 2 cups in the morning, before leaving for work, 1 cup when I get home, and 1 or 2 in the evening after dinner, although after 8 p.m. we both switch to decaf. And as I'm tapping the coffee grains into the spoon to start making the coffee, I find myself thinking about spending the rest of my life with only one person. I should feel scared, apprehensive at the very least, but all I feel is pure, unadulterated joy. Any doubts I may have about this wedding, about getting married, about spending the rest of my life with Dan, have nothing whatsoever to do with Dan, and everything to do with his mother. Chapter 2. There were 3 of us in this marriage. I remember watching Princess Diana roll those huge, sad eyes as she looked up at the camera and said those now infamous words, and I wondered what on earth she was talking about, wondered just how she managed to be so unbelievably dramatic. And now, weeks away from my own wedding, I know exactly what she meant. The only difference being that I'm dealing not with a mistress, but with a matriarch. Frankly, I can't decide which is worse. I met Dan, fell in love with Dan, and agreed to marry Dan, thinking I was marrying, well, Dan. But as the months of preparation have unfolded, I'm beginning to see that I'm marrying Dan, his mother, and, on a slightly less intense level, his father, brother, and sister. Don't get me wrong. For a while I was completely over the moon about this. In the beginning, when we first met, and Dan introduced me to his family, I was thrilled to have found the family I'd always dreamed of. A warm, large and loving family, brothers and sisters, parents who were still together and happy. When Dan confessed on our third date that he went to his parents for lunch every Sunday, I made up my mind there and then that he was going to be the one. A boy who still loves his family, I thought. A family so close they get together every week. What more could a girl ask for? With hindsight, I was bound to think that, given that my own dysfunctional family had fallen to pieces right around the time my mother died. Not that it was the happiest of families that was destroyed. My mother was an alcoholic, unpredictable, manipulative, self-obsessed. When sober, she had the capacity to be exactly the mother I wanted. She could be kind, warm, loving, fun. I remember how much I adored her when I was very young, how she'd take me to puppet shows, laugh delightedly when I giggled at Punch and Judy, scoop me up into her arms while I wriggled and then cover me with kisses. But she wasn't often sober. My mother and father were forever hosting cocktail parties, forever finding excuses to drink. I'd hear the music and laughter and would leave my bedroom and sit on the top step of the stairs, trying to see the glamorous evening dresses without being seen. Then, in the beginning, she was wonderful when she was drunk. "I'm not drunk," she'd laugh, "just a tiny bit tipsy." But her personality became huge when she was drunk, her happiness magnified 1,000-fold by the alcohol. More affectionate, more vibrant, just more. But as the drinking progressed, things changed. Her happiness turned to disappointment, disgust, disease, and the alcohol continued to increase it. Where once she had been fun, she became sullen. Where she had been loving, she became distant. Where she had once covered me with kisses, she attacked me with insults. In time, my father withdrew from both of us. He'd tried to talk to her, but it would end in a screaming match, so he'd grab his coat and go out, for hours at a time, sometimes all night. I learned to read the signs, know when she had been drinking, know when to stay away. My friends were few and far between, but they were loyal and understood when I needed to stay the night, several nights a week. I can't say I was unhappy. Somewhere I was aware that my friends didn't have mothers who were angels one minute, then devils the next, and while I occasionally envied the stability and warmth I found in their homes, I never missed it in my own. It was, after all, the only home I knew. On March 23rd, 1983, I was sitting next to my best friend, Alison, in a history lesson. We were learning about the First World War, and I had drifted away into a reverie involving me, Simon Le Bon, and true love. I'd just got to the part where he gazed into my eyes before the magical first kiss, when Alison nudged me sharply. I looked at her to see her gesturing at the classroom door. Through the glass I could see the headmistress, Mrs. Dickinson, approaching, as did the rest of the class. A collective gasp went around the classroom, for Mrs. Dickinson was clearly about to come in, and, aside from morning assembly, Mrs. Dickinson was a formidable presence who was very definitely seen and not heard. I'm sure she was probably a lovely woman, but the entire school was terrified of her, even the sixth formers. She rarely seemed to smile and stalked around the school, steel-grey hair in a helmet around her face, head held high, staring into the middle distance with a terrifying gleam in her eye. The entire class stopped breathing as we watched the door handle turn, and then she was in front of us, asking to have a word with Mrs. Packer, the history teacher. The two stepped out.